Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Not to cabaret, but to the third and final installment of The Longest Day, Book versus Movie, where we learn that a book and the movie made from it are not always the same thing. I'm going to try to continue the movie first concept, but it's going to be even harder this time than the other two. The book and the movie cover much the same territory, but the sequence of events is totally different. The book contains much more detail and more naval, civilian, and resistance activities, which throw the timelines off by a lot.
Mein lieber Pluskat, welchen Kurs haben denn diese Schiffe?
Auf mich zu, dir!
Well, Major Pluskat may think the entire invasion fleet is heading straight for him, but they're really spread out over about 50 miles of Normandy shoreline. General Bradley observes the landing operations, as he does 7 pages later in the book. Admiral Jajard's speech, also 7 pages in the future, is heavily paraphrased.
Vive la France!
The book does a better job of portraying the pandemonium occurring out in the Channel, but despite showing all these gun barrels, only made mention of one naval encounter. 3 E-boats, the German equivalent of our PT boats, discovered the armada and managed to sink a destroyer before scurrying away. I think from here on, I'm going to try to just play the movie through with only general comments, most of the time, rather than pointing out each time something happens at a different time in a different place. Now, if I did that, I'd be talking continually for the next hour. Everything that happens in the movie happens at a different time, sometimes in a different place, or doesn't occur at all in the book. And there's plenty in the book that doesn't make it to the screen. The book is much more detailed in describing everyone preparing to disembark, but the movie gets the point across. The shelling of the beaches is described. Pluskat is on the phone with Acker and is told to return to his headquarters, as he will be in about 3 or 4 minutes of film time. For now, he's just padding the runtime. The BBC is broadcasting warnings to the French civilians. If you're within 35 kilometers of the coast, get the heck out of there now. However you say that in French. One person listening was Michael Hardeley in his mother's house overlooking Omaha Beach. He was being philosophical about the house about to be trashed, but somehow a strange thought crept into his head. Would that German soldier still deliver coffee that morning? Well, he looked out and saw the scene exactly as shown in the movie.
Et voilà, comme d'habitude, toujours à l'heure.
Now, this Pluskat bit isn't in the book.
Pluskat, hören Sie mich?
Die 5000 Schiffe, die die Alliierten nicht haben können, wie Sie meinen. Sie haben sie. Ja, Sie haben sie.
Was ist denn nun schon wieder los?
And Priller is another 2 chapters away.
Ja, die Invasion. Und sofort zum Einsatz.
Was zum Teufel erwartest du eigentlich? Wir fliegen hin, nur wir beide. Sonst ist ja keiner mehr da. Ich glaube nicht, dass wir zurückkommen. Reinhard.
Now, this is pretty much what most of Chapter 1 and much of Chapter 2 are all about. The book identifies a few specific individuals and a few specific activities. But no mention of Coda striking a dramatic pose.
Jetzt kommen die Landungsboote.
See, I told you. Pluskat is finally ordered to headquarters. By the book's timeline, he's already well on his way. Now this scene is playing out all up and down the coast. Yeah, I know this is the main battle, and it's what most of you want to see. But in this context, it's just a big waste of time.
Assault teams have landed.
Yeah, we can assume this happened, but it wasn't mentioned in the book quite yet, and not quite this way. Coda has his cigar, and Roosevelt has his cane. Now, these are the easiest guys to spot. They're also the only 2 generals in the first wave. At this point in the book, it is mentioned that Roosevelt wrote a personal note to Barton, requesting to be allowed to join the troops storming the beach. It was half a paragraph, not a full scene. Now, Roddy and the dead sergeant cast shadows on a backdrop.
Hey, I made it.
That's sloppy movie
Those 2
making.
guys?
We're starting the war from right here.
We're starting the war from right here. It was the beginning of the day that earned General Roosevelt a promotion, the Distinguished Service Cross, and the Medal of Honor. Ryan states this was the Luftwaffe's only daytime attack against the invasion. In the book, we're climbing the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc, but we need to wait another 15 minutes for the movie to catch up. You know, when there are multiple events occurring simultaneously, decisions must be made as to priority. Now, we were just doing a lot of American stuff, so it's only fair we concentrate on the British for a while. As usual, much more detail in the book, including names and events. The characters played by Connery and Rossington are based on 2 characters in the book, named DeLacy and McQuaid. To quote the book, McQuaid yelled at the shell-smoked shoreline, "Come out, you bastards, and fight us now!" Then he disappeared under the water. Instant later, he came up sputtering. "Oh, the evil of it," he bellowed, "trying to drown me before I could even get up on the beach." Now, the caption says Commander, but both the book and his shoulder stripes say Captain. More sloppy movie making.
Off the beach! I was told I'd be able to put through a short news flash on your radio.
Name and nationality of the reporter was changed, but the situation was much as portrayed. The carrier pigeons were not until later. Some fell to the earth from being overloaded. Some did indeed fly the wrong way.
The other way! traitors!
But 4 were loyal British subjects and arrived in London a few hours later. There's no mention of the stalled carrier.
Right now.
What a day! What a day!
Ryan quotes 2 British soldiers who claimed to have seen the mayor, complete with brass helmet, greeting the troops, but no mention of champagne. Now, this same story is told much more often concerning the Operation Dragoon landings in southern France 2 months later. I'm not sure I believe either story, but stranger things have happened.
Don't want to lose that champagne. All right, men, pull
That
in.
tank just ran over his bicycle. Yes, Cliff Scott was strafed, and not just once. He stumbled and eventually crawled 3 miles to his headquarters. But he survived and acted as one of the many technical advisors on this film. But this was about 20 minutes in the book future. Again, far in the book future, but the exchange is accurate, right down to...
Dumm von mir.
15 book minutes ago, the Rangers were attacking Pointe du Hoc. The movie scene was much as described, but the book named a few individuals. And as always, there's no way of knowing if any of the soldiers in the movie were intended to actually be any of them. Now, the most interesting was Private Joseph Lowe, who came back 18 years later and appeared in the movie as Private Sparrow and climbed the cliffs once again. Almost. It wasn't just Rundstedt and Blumentritt, but generals from all over Normandy were trying to get guidance from Berchtesgaden, triggering a disagreement between Jodl and Walter Warlimont, his deputy. Jodl believed in strictly following the directive to not release the panzers without Hitler's personal approval, while Warlimont was more like, yeah, but the situation requires more immediate action. The famous dissociative identity disorder scene, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, with Richard Todd reporting to Richard Todd.
Smith says to tell you he stood his men
Contrary to popular usage, this is not schizophrenia. And since there were no actors in the book, this scene is not included.
North by east, north by east.
Sorry,
American
Duke,
police is that
your
way.
part in this story is over. According to Ryan, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krause's battalion occupied the town. The only military activities in Britain that were reported in the book were Ike announcing the invasion to the world, happy that he did not have to release that famous note he had written the day before, accepting the sole blame for a failed invasion. And Lieutenant General Sir Frederick Morgan, the author of the original invasion plan, stopping by the side of the road to listen to the news broadcast. The rest of Chapter 5 concerned the reactions of the families of the soldiers and the phone call to Rommel. Westerham is another movie-only scene, but it did serve a purpose. The minute-and-a-half helicopter shot was largely responsible for winning the Oscar for black and white cinematography. Pemsel's speech is highly paraphrased from the book. In respect to not being able to find out what's going on where, Ryan quotes him as saying, "I'm fighting the sort of battle that William the Conqueror must have fought, by ear and sound alone." The movie adaptation of the Omaha beach scenes is as big of a mess as the actual beach was.
You want me to get word off the ships, have them come in, start picking us up?
This was about the time that Bradley, on the battleship, was deciding whether to evacuate, as shown earlier.
And you don't want me to radio the ships?
Eddie Albert had nothing to do with it.
We need every man that can stand. Now pass the word, will you? Only two kinds of people are going to stay on this beach. Those that are already dead and those that are going to die. Now get off your butts.
There's only two kinds of people, ... was actually said by Colonel George Taylor, commander of the 1st Division's 16th Regimental Combat Team. A young ranger, not quite as paralyzed with fear as others, reluctantly volunteered to go back down the beach and drive a bulldozer loaded with TNT up to where it was needed.
Yes?
This, of course, didn't happen. Well, maybe it did. But what I mean is that it wasn't reported in the book as having happened. And that covers a lot of the movie.
Nein,
There's no more pencil.
Wir müssen umgruppieren nach Plan
There's
6.
no Plan 6. And no more John Wayne. This whole scene is invented. I don't suppose I need to say that this scene didn't happen either. Before we return to Omaha, let's touch just briefly on Utah. The 4th Division was moving inland faster than anyone had anticipated. Traffic was snarled. On the exit from the beach, 2 men were directing traffic. Major General Raymond Barton and Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr. Those are certainly traffic cops you paid attention to.
You guys engineers?
Yes, sir.
Does your equipment, those Bangalore torpedoes work?
Yes, sir. We'll make them work.
Now you send some of your men down to the foot of that gully with those Bangalore torpedoes, and you and the rest of the men follow me.
Yes, sir.
The Rangers are ready, General.
Okay, Major, move them out. Captain, move them up.
We're getting murdered here. We might as well move inland and get murdered.
We might as well move inland and get murdered, was said by Colonel Charles Canham of the 116th Regimental Combat Team. Maybe that's who Eddie was supposed to be. Or maybe an amalgamation of Canham and the Colonel Taylor mentioned earlier. Or maybe all the colonels on the beach. Who knows? The entire Sergeant Fuller Bangalore torpedo under the wall business is invented. Sorry. It's a great scene. I'd like to believe it. Eventually, a few destroyers came in closer to the beach and began pounding the German positions. According to Ryan, quote, under the covering barrage, engineers began to complete the demolition job they had begun almost 7 hours earlier. Unquote. Tommy Sands' I wonder what bitte means from Point du Hoc.
Bitte! Bitte!
I wonder what bitter means.
Was actually said here by someone else, but under similar circumstances. So much for main characters having plot armor. Sorry, no more marks either.
Hello? I must be going. I cannot stay. I came to say I must be going.
Hauptstraße liegt bereits unter ständigem Luftangriff.
Was Sie nicht sagen.
But the book has a lot of small scenes showing the poor organization of the German army. The panzers were finally released in the late afternoon. but didn't show up until the next morning. By then, all they could do was slow down local advances, but not make any major difference. Everything, well, 95% of everything in this scene is totally wrong. As previously established, there was no flying officer David Campbell. But there was an earlier mention of a wounded soldier back on Omaha whose thigh was split open. The wound was sutured with safety pins. Private Schultz was not lost. He was with his unit in foxholes near Saint-Mary-Église. He did, however, muse about having not fired his gun at all. And Captain Doering did not die. Yep, except it was a truck, not a Jeep. And there were no cigars in the book.
Okay, run me up the hill, son.
And the only thing left is Rommel returning to his headquarters and the local church bell ringing midnight. As a brief epilogue, I need to mention that although the screen credit reads, screenplay by Cornelius Ryan, based on his book, the following credit reads, additional episodes written by Romain Gary, James Jones, David Purcell, Jack Seddon. When comparing the book to the movie, it's quite easy to tell which scenes were these additional episodes. Now, Gary was French, so I suspect he worked on the French and possibly the German sequences. James Jones was a respected novelist, screenwriter, most famous for From Here to Eternity. Purcell and Seddon were longtime writing partners in Britain, specializing in mysteries and war films, but not above lower-class fare. They had a carry-on film among their resumes. The parts of the movie that corresponded with the book were likely done by Ryan, and the fictionalized parts were probably from these guys. For the book, Ryan relied on official sources, as well as 383 out of the 700 interviews he conducted with survivors on both sides. So I feel confident that the contents of the book are reliable. When I say a movie scene didn't happen, I specifically mean it wasn't in the book. But that means it probably really didn't happen. If you want to learn anything about anything, don't rely on movies. You must read books. Now, this was obvious when I did my series on the Lord of the Rings. It's up there and down there. And has been reinforced by The Longest Day. We have reached the end. I really wish there was more to this. I thoroughly enjoyed it and hope you all got something out of it as well. Now, thanks for watching, and keep your eyes open. You never know what I might come up with next. Do all the YouTube support stuff. But even better, buy me a coffee.